What really happened with your host, Mike Rivero. The history the government hopes you never learn. Here is your host, Michael Rivero.
Whoops, and aloha. Oh, there we are. Bad equipment. And aloha, America. Welcome to our show today. It is Friday, May 12th, 2017. And thank goodness it's Friday. Thank goodness it's Friday. We've got a lot of stuff to talk about today. The phone lines are open, 800-313-9443. Mike is in our control room, ready to answer the phone. And the lovely Lady Claire will be joining us in hour number 3 of our program today with her unique perspective on the world. Now, I'm going to do the news a little out of the normal order that I tend to do these programs in because there's a piece of news in the world of computers that really needs to get on out there, and you need to pay attention. Right now, there is an epic ransomware attack going on all across the globe. And maybe even bigger than the ransomware creators wanted it to be because it's drawing a lot of attention. It's called the WannaCry ransomware. And what makes this very powerful is that it is apparently using some of the NSA's hacking tools and exploits within the Windows operating system. Now, if you're on a Mac, if you're running on Linux, then you don't have to worry about this. But it is just raising havoc all over Europe and Asia. It's hit the national health system in Britain. They can't get into their files. And one of the nasty things about this is that not only is it ransomware, it is a worm, which means it will go into your system, read your address book, and mail itself out to other people disguised as you. And there's an attachment, and if you click it, you are hosed. So be extra vigilant about any attachments you get in email, even if it's from somebody you think that you know. Just be very, very careful. Right now, they still haven't worked out a way to block it. This just came out of nowhere, and it's spread to 74 different countries. Now, supposedly, there was a patch for this vulnerability, which, according to one report, was discovered and developed as a cyber weapon by the National Security Agency. And the patch went out last March. Unfortunately, a lot of enterprise systems, they're not staying up to date on their patches. A lot of people turned off automatic updates back when Windows was trying to force Windows 10 on us all. And I did a little web search because my automatic updates on my machine won't work at all. It says starting to download updates, and it sits at 000. Apparently a common problem. Apparently a lot of the automated updates for Windows 7 don't work anymore. Something broke them. And it just shows you the deplorable state of IT in general and computer security. And again, this is all courtesy of the National Security Agency, which wanted to just drill holes in all of our systems. And this is the result because criminals have now found and started to use these tools. And we are all sitting ducks. Personally, I think everybody who's got to pay the ransom, which is about $300 worth, needs to bill the NSA. The NSA ought to pay for this. This is their mess. If they weren't running around drilling holes in the security of all of our systems, this would not be happening today. So it is massive, and again, be very careful about attachments on emails from people you think that you knew. Now, the reason so many companies are being hit very hard is because this WannaCry ransomware uses an NSA tool known as Eternal Blue. And Eternal Blue allows the ransomware to spread laterally across business computer networks through a vulnerability in commonly used Windows file sharing systems. And apparently, this is the vulnerability where they're literally, it's able to hop from machine to machine over this file sharing, this Windows file sharing. And apparently, even if you have this Windows file sharing in multiple locations across the country, it's going to leap across that. It's just absolutely running rampant. Something like, I think, 86,000 reported instances so far, and it's still spreading out of control. Now, right now, the WannaCry ransomware is at the top of the most wanted list here. But apparently, Telefonica in Spain has been hit. In fact, Telefonica literally told all their employees, shut down your computers now. Stop work. Just stop. Pull the plug. let's see what else. FedEx got hit. Reports of infections in Great Britain, here in the United States, China, Russia. Russia's just really been hit. It's just very heavy in there. Spain, Italy, Vietnam, Taiwan, and others. And again, 36,000 instances that we know of. And according to Kaspersky, it's in 74 countries, and it is still growing. It is spreading out of control. Let's see. I wonder if they're going to blame this on Russia. I mean, they've already tried to blame the 2008 Obamacare. They're trying to say now that Russians hacked that as well. But again, pointing on out, most of the WannaCry infections are actually in Russia. It's almost like somebody declared cyber war and specifically targeted Russia, and it's spread to other countries, and it's infecting them as well. We're going to do a quick shout-out now to our on-air affiliates who are just now rejoining the network, and we're going to take a phone call from Tim in Michigan. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Aloha, Mike.
Aloha.
Okay, so I was looking at Facebook this morning, and I saw this thing. It's called the Labor Minute that you can look up on Facebook. And regarding your internet connection with Spectrum, there seems to be a labor dispute between the IBEW and Time Warner Spectrum Cable.
Okay, that might account for it, because it's still horrible. I'm still only getting 10% of what we're paying to get in terms of bandwidth. You know, I'm surprised.
No, the issue that I'm speaking of is in New York. But I'm pretty sure that if there's a labor dispute in New York, there might also be labor disputes also in other parts of the country.
Well, depending, depending on, hang on a second. I have to send a message to the control room. Depending upon how the network is set up, difficulties in New York could impact the whole net. I mean, looking at the map on Down Detector, the problems with Spectrum are pretty much all over the country and here in Hawaii. Apparently, one of our somebody called into the show saying they can't see my BAM user feed. It is going out from here. We are sending out BAM user, but apparently it's not being visible. I mean, the whole net is in the United States. It's like our bridges, like our roads, like our buildings, and it's deteriorating. It's suffering the effects of neglect. It's not being expanded to deal with increasing demand and usage. And it's starting to show the strain because, again, going back to Down Detector, looking at the other major ISPs, Spectrum is the worst, but they're all showing little problems here and there. And obviously, in a system that large and complex, there are always going to be some issues somewhere. But in terms of Spectrum, it is really horrible. And I was unaware of the labor dispute, and I was guessing that the merging of Spectrum's charter internet with the Time Warner internet was not being done very well, and there's all kinds of conflicts. But the quality of service out here, it's just terrible. It's just terrible.
Yeah, so I thought I'd bring that to your attention.
Well, thank you very much. That is a useful piece of information to have here. And thank you very much for the phone call. We're going to let you go here. And we're going to get on back to the news, back to our normal format here. And obviously, we're still seeing the after effects of the firing of FBI Director James Comey. And we are continuing to hear from within the FBI itself that this would open up a very real possibility of the Hillary Clinton email server case and her staffers being reviewed. The case could be reviewed. And they're even talking about reviewing the immunity deal to see if those were inappropriate. They could revoke those. So this thing could really heat on up. And, boy, ever since Comey was fired, my server has also been under increased attack. In fact, it's almost as intense as it was in the days before the election here. And looking at the logs, I can tell the files the DOSers are trying to paralyze most, and it is all the files dealing with the various Clinton scandals. And we're going to get into those. We're going to take a phone call first. Then we're going to do a little walk down memory lane in terms of all the things that the Clintons ought to be investigated on. So, Kyle in Pennsylvania, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hey, Mike. This whole Comey thing is a whole much to do about nothing. And I cannot believe the media, the left media, the mainstream media that is claiming this hysteria over it. I mean, they're really showing their back end on this one. You know, the CEO of Coca-Cola goes away. They don't stop making Coke. If they think that removing Comey is going to have any significant impact on any sort of investigation, that's ludicrous to think so. I think.
Well, I disagree with you. And we are hearing from people inside the FBI that they were furious that Comey and Loretta Lynch were protecting Hillary Clinton when she's obviously committed these felony violations of Title 18. Now, if Comey is gone and and it looks like McCabe may be following him real soon, and if there are no investigations or reopening the case, then I think that's going to send a very bad message to the American people. I mean, supposedly we want to have somebody at the head of the FBI that the American people are going to trust and rebuild confidence in the FBI, but the FBI is never going to have the public trust and confidence unless they start looking at these crimes that the American public are aware took place. Comey admitted he committed felony violations of Title 18, and the American people are angry. Remember all those crowds that were shouting, lock her up, lock her up? Politics is perception. This is not going to go away.
I absolutely agree, and I think that Comey was, to a big degree, using his position for his own personal gain. I think he was trying to play both sides of the election to make sure that whatever happened, whoever won, he came out on top. And in a way, he managed to screw himself on both ends, as well as severely damaging the perception of the FBI. They need to bring out the big guns, and they need to, you know, I think reopening the case against the Clintons would be probably the best thing they possibly could do.
Yeah, right now, the FBI needs to be seen by the American public as doing their job and investigating these crimes, corruptions, and possible espionage.
As for your internet connection that you say, is it a coax-based connection, broadband, or is it a satellite-based?
Here in Hawaii, it's optical from the coastline and optical into the neighborhoods, and then it goes from optical to basically Ethernet coming into the home.
Okay, so what you should be able to do is call your provider, and they can run a test called a home integrity check or premises health test, and you want to know what your upstream is. You want to make sure it's below 50, and make sure your received power is above negative 10 decibels per millivolt.
Well, yeah, I'm familiar with all of that, and we've already done that. And my internet speed from here to what used to be the Time Warner Center up in Mililani is very good. It is the connection to the mainland that is crawling, and they're aware of the problem, and we are working on it. But you do have to sort of force your way past the talking points where you call the service and support people, and the first thing they're trying to do is convince you, oh, it must be your problem. We are perfect. We never make mistakes. And generally, I have to go through this song and dance for about 10 minutes every time I call support to convince them I really do know what I'm doing in terms of my computers and routers and modems and everything, and the problems at that end. And then there'll be a heavy sigh of relief and say, yeah, you're right. There are some issues in your area, and blah, 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 blah. But if you, again, go over to downdetector.com. There's a comment board under there, and you're seeing all these people who are saying the Spectrum Internet service is slow or non-existent, and they're just furious with the attitude displayed by Spectrum's customer support, which is, it must be your fault, there's nothing wrong with us. And yet, obviously, there are significant problems with Spectrum all over the country. And they even got sued by the state of New York for only delivering a fraction of the bandwidth that they promised customers they were going to get.
There are ways around that. There are ways that you can, even if you're paying for 10, say, megabits per second, you can, there are obviously ways that you can increase that.
Yeah, I've heard about those, but, I am paying for the high bandwidth. I really would like to get it, and that is the issue here. Okay, obviously there is
a node problem.
Okay, well, listen, Kyle, thank you very much for the information. We're going to let you go. We're going to take another phone call from Sherry in Texas. Sherry, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hi, Mike. Yeah, I'm going to go back to this idea of this wordplay thing. See, the term extreme carelessness is not in Title 18. And that's
it
what
says negligence.
Conspired.
It's negligence is the
yes,
term.
But see, I don't think he used those words. See, this is semantics, wordplay. Comey conspired to throw, along with others. I don't think he thought this up all by himself. I think, this is my interpretation of it, he conspired to throw the conviction through semantics or the meaning of words. So he is in fact guilty of intent to deceive. He is the intent to deceive.
I would agree, or obstruction of justice. He's clear. It's not the FBI's job to recommend whether somebody gets charged or not, and Comey exceeded his authority. And, obstruction of justice is there. But in the end, in both Hillary Clinton and Huma Abedin's case, James Comey said, we don't think they ought to be charged because we couldn't find intent of wrongdoing. But if you look at that section of Title 18 where it talks about negligence, intent isn't needed. And Trey Gowdy called him on in that last hearing. Okay?
But the thing is, he intentionally used the word extreme carelessness, which means the same thing, you see. But he could fool people with that. It's semantics. He interpreted gross negligence as extreme carelessness, like it's an entirely different thing. And it's really not. If, in fact, the jury, the justices, whoever look at this, can determine that extreme carelessness is the same thing, then he was just deceptive in his use of words, because he was in fact saying gross negligence, but without using the word.
It's really irrelevant, because the whole point of that section of Title 18 is it is the act of exposing classified information to a non-secure environment that is the crime, and intention does not enter into it. And it doesn't matter what words he used. The instant that Hillary or Huma Abedin were sending classified information to private email service and laptops, they are in violation right there. And what their intention was is irrelevant. Whether they were just being careless is irrelevant. No. The exposure of the information is the crime.
But here's the sneaky thing. He didn't use the words. It didn't mean anything. He used that in a creative way to fool everyone.
It doesn't
by not
matter.
Saying gross negligence.
Well, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter which word he used. He was hoping that people didn't understand Title 18 or hadn't read it. But for those of us for those of us who read Title 18, it doesn't matter what words he used. In the end, he gave Hillary Clinton and Huma Abedin a get-out-of-jail-free card by saying he couldn't find intention of wrongdoing when intention is not required under Title 18 for a conviction.
I'm not trying to say she wasn't guilty. I'm just showing an angle he used that's going to be used against him, because what he did was deceptive. He fooled people into thinking just because he didn't say the word gross negligence that somehow they got off. See, that's the deception. That is the deception. Is semantics, and we'll see what they do about this. It's sure they're guilty. But he got away with something that's kind of erroneous, because it doesn't matter, gross negligence, just because he didn't use those words. See, that was the deception. He didn't have to use those words, gross negligence, but he gave the impression that because he didn't say gross negligence, that somehow she got off, see.
Well,
I think no one caught it.
I think you're making a mountain out of a molehill here, because it doesn't matter if he uses gross negligence. It doesn't matter if he uses carelessness. He was trying to make a case for not prosecuting by saying she didn't mean to do wrong, when the law itself says it is the act that is the crime, not the I'm not arguing against that fact at all. Okay, all right.
Okay.
All right, we're gonna let you go. We got to take a break for commercials, and we'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here. So with the possibility that we may actually see some investigation of the Clintons and their cronies, it's time to take a walk down memory lane, looking back on the history of the Clintons. And of course, certainly for me, it all starts with the death of White House Deputy Counsel Vincent Foster, which was obviously a murder made to look like a suicide. And that was the scandal which got me blacklisted out of Hollywood, and my involuntary transition to truth activist and enemy of the deep state. And we put all these things up at whatreallyhappened.com. And these are the files that are being targeted by these DOS attacks that we're weathering right now. So we've made PDFs of a lot of them. Please feel free to copy and download and share with your friends. One of the articles that has the most coverage around the world is, of course, the infamous Clinton body count. And it's a list of all these people who had evidence on the Clintons or dealings with the Clintons who wound up dead under very, very strange circumstances. Then there's the Epic of Clinton's Mess, which is an overview of all the scandals, including Chinagate, which may be the precedent for what was going on with that private email server. Then we have an article about the activities at Mena, Arkansas, which was one of the main airports used for this CIA smuggling operation, where they were manufacturing untraceable military weapons and smuggling them down to Nicaragua to give to the Contras to use against the Sandinistas. Even all the way back then, mid-1980s, we're going to regime change countries. And because this particular covert war was illegal under the Boland Amendment, the CIA funded it by smuggling literally tons and tons of cocaine back into the United States of America to sell to your children. And it was all being run out of Arkansas under then Governor Bill Clinton. And then finally, of course, the question that I want to see asked and answered regarding the email server. Given the precedent of Chinagate back in 1994, was Hillary Clinton desperate to get money to win or steal the White House last year, selling U.S. secrets to foreign interests using her weak email server to deliver and her so-called charitable foundation to collect and launder the money? And remember how much foreign money was pouring into that foundation. And remember when the hacker Guccifer was talking about his break into the weak email server, he reported seeing at least 10 foreign IPs logged in, prowling around the files. The Democrats are still making a big deal about, oh, how could you fire the FBI director? These are the same Democrats that were calling for Comey's head on a pike back when he was investigating the email scandal. Now that he's investigating the Russia connection, oh, we've got to have them up there. But again, remember, Bill Clinton fired his FBI director the day before Vince Foster's body was found, which meant the FBI's investigation was leaderless and clueless. All right, we're going to take a few more phone calls here. Peter in Los Angeles, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hey, Mike. Happy Friday.
Happy Friday. Boy, a week glad it was here.
Yeah. Just want to remind everybody this ridiculous talk about fake news and talk about fake investigations. Hillary was never put under oath, ever. Never put under oath. Even when she went in front of Congress, they didn't get her for lying in front of Congress, which is a crime.
Actually, I believe there is actually one case where she was under oath and she did make a misstatement and they just let it slide. As far as her home server, she got to that before anybody else could. It was subject to a mil-spec wipe of all the hard drives. And what was amazing, though, is after Hillary and the DNC were claiming Russia hacked the DNC's email servers, nobody but CrowdStrike was allowed to look at those. And CrowdStrike said, "Oh yes, it's Russia." Yeah. So yeah.
No, nobody looked at the servers. What happened to the guy? Who's the guy that disappeared?
Brian Pagliano here.
Pagliano.
All right, Peter, I'm going to put you on hold. I'm going to put you on hold. We'll be right back after these commercials. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. We're talking with Peter in Los Angeles. And Peter, you are about to move on to a new subject.
Well, it was the same one, but we were saying that she was not under oath. They never put her under oath, the FBI. all her principal aides and people who would have been participants were given blanket immunity.
Yes.
They never confiscated the server. Then there's the disappearance of Brian Pagliano. Then we have the death of Seth Rich. And then we have the meeting on the tarmac between Bill Clinton and Loretta Lynch.
Yes.
Then we have the letter that just came out where Loretta Lynch is basically saying, we're going to protect basically Hillary Clinton. All this came from Obama. Obviously.
Yes.
He had every time he got an email from Hillary that didn't say .gov on the end of it. I mean, it would have been enough if there was what happened, the massive breach of security under his watch, and he did nothing about it, which he did nothing about it except cover it up.
Yeah, I remember when he got up there on TV and said the first he even learned about it was on the national media, which is getting to be kind of a consistent meme with all of these people. Oh, I had no idea, though. I mean, Huma Abedin initially said, "Oh, I had no idea those emails were on Anthony's laptop. I only learned about it from the news media." And then, of course, Comey came on out and said that Huma Abedin was in the habit of regularly transmitting State Department emails to Anthony Weiner's laptop, ostensibly to print, which makes it sound like they don't have printers in the State Department. And there were 650,000 emails on that laptop. Now, maybe Huma Abedin was trying to build herself a little a safety file, where if she got into trouble down the road, she could say, well, I've got all the evidence that you guys were doing this, that, and the other thing, and sort of a little dead man switch, which at that level of government a lot of people tend to do. Vince Foster's one mistake was his dead man switch was inside his White House office wall safe, where it could be gotten to before the investigators showed up.
If history shows anything, Mike, if you work for the Clintons, you better have a goddamn dead man switch. But on the flip side of all that with Comey is that there's been nothing at all on Russiagate's preposterous, and yet he's let this go on and on without coming out and making an unequivocal statement. So the guy was poison. He's a drug laundering lackey, deep state. And all this stuff comes really from Obama. Loretta Lynch, Eric Holder.
It goes back further than that because you hit it on the head when you talked about Comey being a drug money launderer when he was at HSBC, because that's what ties all of this together. The Bushes, the Clintons, Loretta Lynch, Comey. It's the narcocracy. It's this cancer of CIA-sanctioned drug running, drug selling inside our country, and it's corrupted much of our government, even worse than it was corrupted during Prohibition. And right now they are fighting to not only survive and perpetuate, they're trying to figure out some way they can go back underneath the rock, because more and more people are taking a look at how this all ties together, going on back to all this CIA drug running out of Arkansas in the 1980s, the heroin they were bringing in during Vietnam, the heroin they're bringing in now from Afghanistan. And it's obviously, for those on the inside, it's a sweet deal. They're all making huge amounts of money. But look around our country, and then look at any other country where the drug lords have taken control, and you will see the same decay, the same despair, the same poverty, the same out-of-control drug addiction in the streets.
Mike, if I could ask you one thing, and then I'll let you go. I know there's got to be a lot of calls, but yesterday you talked about a story about how, speaking of how he's not shut down Russiagate with absolutely no evidence at all. He hasn't come out and said it. He's let that go on. But you broke a story yesterday about how the FBI was trying to talk somebody into saying that they were a Russian.
Yeah.
Involved in that. Can you repeat that for me?
Well, basically the story is that there was this Russian hacker who was arrested for hacking into some company internet, and was finally arrested. And while he was waiting trial, through his lawyer, he is saying that he was approached by agents of the FBI who said they would get the charges dropped, they would move him to the United States, they'd get him a citizenship and an apartment, and all he had to do was say that he was hacking the DNC email server on behalf of Russia. So they were trying to manufacture a witness. And I guess this guy just decided he didn't want to get involved in that, probably because so many other people who play ball with the government at that level do wind up much worse off in the long run, because the government never keeps their promises about this sort of thing. So that's the story that came on out. Well, it goes all the way back to Bill Clinton and George Bush and the CIA itself. That's the rotted core right there, is CIA and their entanglement with drug money, and that actually goes all the way back to Ronald Reagan, because it was Ronald Reagan's Attorney General, William French Smith, who literally wrote the rules saying that the CIA could be involved with drug traffickers without having to turn them over to the DEA. Critics have called it the CIA's license to smuggle. Well, the CIA was then in a position to set up protected drug smuggling routes that were safe from being investigated, and they took advantage of that, which is what led to Iran-Contra and to the mess we're in today.
And, Mike, they can't launder that kind of money, even the CIA, without the banks.
Well, I mean, remember the BCCI scandal and now HSBC? Yeah, they need the banks to do it.
And before that, there was one called Nuke in Hand back in the early 80s.
Yes.
And another one with the Vatican Bank laundering money.
Yeah.
Tied in with the CIA.
And when Pope John Paul I came on in, he wanted to clean that up, which is why he didn't stay alive all that long. And I'm trying to... Roberto Calvi was the head of the Vatican Bank. They found his body hanging underneath the Blackfriars Bridge in London.
Mike, have a great weekend.
All right, thanks an awful lot here. We're going to take a phone call from Steve in California. Aloha, Steve. Thank you for waiting. What's on your mind?
Well, a couple of callers back, you had a young female calling, and I think I understand what she was talking about. She's talking about the redefining of the English language, and we saw that with Bill Clinton, with his under oath saying, yeah, that all depends on the definition, is. And it clearly, the Title 18 does say you don't have to show any kind of criminal intent. It's just the act itself, and we know that's exactly what she was guilty of. She's guilty of many violations of Title 18. But I think what James Comey was treading lightly on that and covering his own behind, and using that English variation, the definition of is, redefining that definition to say that's the way I look at it, and that's the way I'm going to look at this situation and let it go. But, that doesn't fly. That doesn't fly at all. And so, clear analysis of that and an investigation to why he did not act appropriately by the law, which also would bring in Loretta Lynch, the Attorney General at the time. This thing goes deep, goes very deep. Michael, and it should be exposed to why people in prominent positions did not do their job. Something coerced them, somebody forced them to make those decisions of redefining the definition of is when you get to the bottom of that problem there.
Well, I don't want to get focused on the specific language being used because for those people who didn't read or don't know Title 18, it doesn't matter whether Comey says negligence or carelessness. For those people who have read Title 18, it doesn't really matter whether Comey used negligence or carelessness. In the context of Comey having obstructed justice, it doesn't matter which words he used. And certainly, Comey exceeded his authority in making a decision about whether or not Hillary should be charged, because that's the province of the Attorney General. The FBI is supposed to gather all the evidence, present it to the Attorney General, and then the Attorney General gets to make that decision and carry the political heat for it. And what Loretta Lynch wanted Comey to do was to basically say, we're not recommending charges, in order she could say, we agree, and therefore it's not just her acting unilaterally to protect Hillary Clinton, but we have a consensus of opinion among all these corrupted people that we're not going to charge the corrupted presidential candidate.
Oh, I agree. I totally agree. There was a role reversal on job description there, big time. It was hilarious to say, well, wait a minute, I'm really the person to decide. When I'm going to throw it to you and you decide, and I'm going to sit back and take your job responsibility. The whole definition of their job description has been reversed, basically from the AG to the FBI director. I thought that was amazing, and I think we all caught that really fast. Something else is at play here, that somebody else is saying, I won't decide, you decide, and not doing my job, basically.
Well, again, if Hillary were to actually be charged, or any of Hillary's associates, sooner or later somebody's going to say, I'm not eating this all by myself. Here's what's really been going on. The Bushes and the Clintons and the CIA are behind the vast majority of drug smuggling and drug sales inside this country. These banks were laundering the money. Yes, they were using the Clinton Foundation. All these people are dirty with it, and the whole thing is going to unravel. And that's why you're seeing such a panic all over the corporate media, all over the government itself. This is a secret that could bring down the entire government. The fact that the biggest drug smuggler in the country is the country itself. That's the sort of thing that can really destroy a government. And that's why they're trying so hard to protect Hillary Clinton, not because they like Hillary Clinton. They're protecting their own wealth, power, and connections to the smuggling. And that's why they're trying so hard to say, no, pay no attention to all the cocaine deaths in the country and all the, it's all about Trump and Russia, Trump and Russia, Trump and Russia. And they're still pounding it, even though we have people like even Dianne Feinstein, who hates Donald Trump, and she's out there saying, no, there actually is no evidence of any collusion. And I loved the look on Wolf Blitzer's face when she said that.
Yeah, it's just media distraction, but, I see a lot of plea deals and a lot of deals being given to give the goods out on what's going on. And I want to know why nothing was done and nothing's been said about those 37,000 emails that were deleted, the hard drives that were scrubbed when the FBI said don't do this. My gosh, if you and I did that, we'd be in jail already.
Absolutely.
But, I just want to see that opened up wide to say, people, there is only one law. It applies to all. We don't have a two-tier system here. We have one law that applies to everyone equally, and this person here sees it as a two-tier system. Open it up. Get it done.
Well, beyond that, I think it's time for the American people to basically man up or woman up. Don't want to get the PCers on my case here. And just start to acknowledge the incredible degree, breadth, and depth of the corruption that we have in the upper levels of the federal government. They are all dirty. Again, the former director, Comey, was a member of the board at HSBC while the drug money laundering was going on, for which HSBC was eventually prosecuted in other countries and wrist-slapped here in the United States.
Well, one last comment real quick here is Maxine Waters. My God, is that woman in the news, and she won't shut up. I just got to laugh at her for the investigation that needs to continue on something that they can't find, but they're going to try as hard as they can to manufacture an email or something using probably Vault 7, put it on somebody's hard drive to say, look, we found it finally. Look, we finally found it. I can't get over the partisan politics and how the rule of law is just,
Yeah, it's all subordinate. Again, yes, it's partisan politics, but it's more than that. It's the narcocracy fighting for its survival. And again, looking at the bickering going on in the Congress, they're not actually doing their job. They're not governing, and maybe that's actually a good thing if you think about it. Again, the real divide is those on the inside of the CIA's drug-running operation and those who are on the outside. And those on the inside are going to protect each other. They're going to cover for each other. Remember when you were in high school, there was always the clique of the rich kids and the beautiful kids, and they got away with everything because they were always covering for each other. That's what we have in Washington, D.C. They have that same mindset. The only difference is that they've got nuclear weapons now. But that's exactly what's going on. Anyway, Steve, I'm going to let you go.
Thank you.
All right, we're going to switch to Bob in Las Vegas. Bob, thank you for waiting so patiently. What is on your mind?
Oh, thanks, Mike. Thanks for taking my call. Oh, and a thank you to Steve from California for recommending that program about Big Bird in the Sky. About the
Bob, are you there? We lost him. Boy, talk about failing infrastructure. This is starting to everything's breaking down in this country. It's amazing. All right, now, getting on back to McCabe, who is the Deputy Director of the FBI and is now, at least for the moment, the interim FBI Director while a new permanent Director is looked for. And apparently, we mentioned the other day, he's under investigation. It turns out he's under two separate investigations, the Department of Justice and the Senate Judiciary Committee. And I find it absolutely amazing to think that we have an interim director of the FBI who is himself underneath investigation. All right, Bob in Las Vegas, are you on the line again?
Yes, sir.
Okay, so please continue where
you hear me?
I can hear you. Where?
Okay. Oh, I was just going to say thanks to Steve for recommending that show about the drones. I'm going to watch that this weekend. Mike, the whole Russia gate, it's all distraction, so these people, don't have to do their real jobs. Although you did say maybe that's a good thing, that they're not governing. But you were right. Ross Perot said this in '92. It's the system that's corrupt. You can bring good people into government, but it won't matter. The system is so corrupting, it'll even change good people, which it has, I'm sure, over the years. But, Mike, on the computer attacks, actually, last night, I did see a headline. I didn't read the article, but apparently Hayden, the former CIA director, called for cyber warfare against Russia.
Oh, yes, that's right, he did. And Russia is where this ransomware is really doing the most damage.
Yes. So, all these faces that did such good for this country, like Condi Rice is back in the news. What do you know? She's back in the news telling us about, I guess they want to get her advice on what Trump should do in foreign policy. I mean, she has such a great record of accomplishments. So, it's just amazing.
Well, we're seeing a faction fight within the government, and that may be a good thing. It could lead to an actual fracturing and collapse of the government. Again, the parallels with what was going on in the Soviet Union in the months before it fell apart, we're seeing it all over here. A government that is so at war with itself that it can't function. And that's really where we are. Anyway, listen, Bob, we're going to let you go and take a break for commercials, and we'll be back with another phone call. Then we're going to get on back to the news because I got a lot to cover before Claire shows up. We'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here. We're going to take another phone call. Then we're going to close the phone lines for a bit. Mo in Florida, aloha. What's on your mind today?
Aloha, Michael. Thank you for taking my call. I think the most important thing Trump can do is put out a message somehow that anybody that's involved in any kind of wrongdoing to a certain level, there'll be like an amnesty. Get whistleblowers to come forward. They're all compromised with, like with the Jeffrey Epstein type thing. Look, you've done a few. Everybody's done bad things. We're going to have a moratorium. We're going to give an amnesty to certain levels of crime and put that out there. Because I know, like you, Michael, I've listened to you since you started. I think we're at an inflection point. And he needs people. They're all scared. They're afraid if they stick their head up, they're going to get it cut off. And this, I think, the most important thing Trump could do. What do you think?
Well, that would be one thing that you could do, but there are two other aspects. First and foremost, those who turn state's evidence against this narcocracy pay for it, and a perfect illustration of that is Barry Seal, who was one of the CIA's pilots flying guns from Arkansas down to Nicaragua and cocaine back, and following the crash of Eugene Hassenfuss's plane, and him blowing the whistle on the whole thing, leading to Iran-Contra, Barry Seal got caught with drugs, and he was turned into an informant. And when that came on out, and it was revealing the links of this drug-running operation all the way up to the White House, he was literally ordered by the judge in his case to live in this motel, and he was literally ordered not to have bodyguards or any guns whatsoever. And, of course, these two guys with machine guns showed up and just gunned him down. So that's the second factor. And the third one is for those who are in public life, such as those who are running for re-election, it doesn't matter if they are given legal indemnity for their crimes. The public awareness of their crimes is going to be a threat to their future careers. So I wish it was as simple as saying, okay, all crimes below this level, we're not going to prosecute because we want to go after the big criminals. But it's not that simple.
Well, I think it could be an avalanche of whistleblowers coming forward to where he already has a mandate, I believe. I think this would just reinforce it. I mean, if I was, nobody's perfect. I've done some stupid stuff in my life. And, nothing, never killed anybody or anything really bad. But, there's things that people, they've been following, monitoring everybody's phone calls. Everybody in Congress, they've got a dossier. They've got they've got their MO on everybody. But if there was just a level, say, look, it doesn't have to be made public. It could be some kind of, I don't know. I just think that I think if he does, I think we're at a crescendo point right here, a tipping point, and I think there's a lot of people that are they want to come forward, but they're afraid of what their family's going to think or something like this. And I think there could be some kind of indemnification to put a buffer there.
We're talking about people who are going to be willing to go into the witness protection program and start life all over again in some other part of the country. That is an awful lot to ask, but it has happened. And something you need to remember about the whistleblowers, the first one to make a deal gets the best deal. And everybody who shows up later, well, their information just isn't worth as much because it's merely confirmation. I'd like to see it happen. I'd like to see the whole ugly mess start to unravel. It's been a curse on the country. It's certainly been a curse on Claire and I for the last 23 going on 24 years. And I would like to see the situation finally resolved. I'd like to see that. What can I tell you? Thank you for the phone call. Mo, we're going to take a break for station identification. We're closing the phone lines, and we'll be right back. Aloha, America. Welcome back to the show, hour number 2. We're closing the phone lines right now because I've got to get caught up on the news here. Just checking my email, somebody wrote on in and said they're reading about this massive ransomware attack, and it's now up to 45,000 known infections across 75 countries. But there's hardly a mention of it on the corporate media. It's still Comey and Trump and Russiagate and just it's amazing here. I mean, this is a real problem. This is a real threat to American businesses because some American businesses have already been hit with this, like FedEx. So it may not absolutely positively be there overnight, at least for the next few days while they sort out that mess here. And yeah, they're still pushing this whole thing, Russia, 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 because that's basically the last card they've got to play to deflect public attention away from the crimes of Hillary Clinton and her associates. Because they are really, really scared that the public is looking at that, and they're trying to offer up Trump, Russia, look over here, it's a distraction. But that doesn't work. They'll drop kittens into a blender or something. Anything to keep the American people from really looking back at what's gone wrong with this country over the last 30 years, and all of it goes back to that CIA operation out of Arkansas in the mid-1980s, and all the people who helped the CIA do what they were doing, which was criminal violations, and they all got rich off of some of that drug money. And we saw the same thing happening during Prohibition. The gangsters who got rich on alcohol money had enough money to get into politics. When Prohibition began, old Joe Kennedy was solidly middle class, and when Prohibition was over, he was rich enough to get his sons headed for the White House. John F. Kennedy made it. Robert F. Kennedy was on his way. Ted Kennedy probably would have run, except for Chappaquiddick, which may have been an attempt on his life. Now, Senator Mark Warner is at the forefront of screaming, we need to find Donald Trump's Russia link, we've got to look into his business dealings, blah, 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 blah. Turns out Senator Mark Warner himself, back in 2012, made $6 million from Yandex, a Russian tech business. And apparently that $6 million represents almost 10% of his entire net worth. So it's classic hypocrisy. It's okay for Senator Warren to be having business dealings with Russia, but, oh, by golly, the fact that Donald Trump was doing business with Russia before he even got into political life, that's the curse of doom. He needs to go. All right, so let's talk about what's going on in other parts of the world. North Korea has actually sent a formal protest to the United States Congress over the sanctions onto North Korea. And these are over and above the sanctions for the nuclear weapons and the sanctions for the ballistic missiles. The new sanctions target North Korea's shipping industry and claims that North Korea is using slave labor. Now, that's rich coming from a nation that has a thriving prison industry, prison labor industry. The privatized prisons are factories. They make things there. And obviously, products that are produced by these prison factories are going to be lower in cost than products produced by regular American businesses with paid employees. It's unfair competition. Now, Paul Craig Roberts he's out there sounding the warning. And he's basically still going on with this idea that as far as he can tell, Washington, D.C. is seriously considering a nuclear first strike on Russia. It's one of the reasons they're trying to get these THAAD batteries all over the place so that only a few of Russia's retaliatory nukes will get through to the United States of America. But apparently the operations command of the Russian General Staff is concerned that Washington, D.C. is actually thinking in these terms. And we're getting this from Lieutenant General Viktor Pozner, Deputy Chief of the Main Operations Directorate of the Russian Armed Forces. And he was speaking at the Moscow International Security Conference, saying, yes, we are concerned Washington, D.C. is considering a nuclear first strike on our country. And again, going on back to the Cuban Missile Crisis, the reason we did not get a nuclear war then is Kennedy and Khrushchev knew that their counterpart did not want to push that button. And they were able to avoid being driven to that point. Now we have the Russians thinking our government wants to push the button. And that means if things start to ratchet up, Russia's going to be more ready to push that button out of their very justifiable fear that the U.S. is ready to push the button. That is a recipe for disaster. Now, as you know, President Trump has created a new commission by executive order to look at the integrity of the American voting system. It is unfortunately focusing almost entirely on last year's election, which does need to be looked at. But there's a larger problem with election fraud in this country, and it goes back for years and years. And we really ought to be looking on creating as much of a fraud-proof election system as possible. And I've already written an article with some pretty good ideas in there, which I've since been informed are in use in other countries. But Kevin O'Keefe is out there. James O'Keefe is out there. He's got all these videos that he got during last year where the Democrats were committing all this election fraud and registration fraud. And it was on a massive, massive scale. So there's plenty there for them to look at. And remember, despite all this screaming about Russia influenced the election for Donald Trump, all of the election fraud from last year that has been documented and investigated, all of it favored Hillary Clinton. And you need to keep that in mind. All right, we're going to do a shout-out now to our on-air affiliates who are just now rejoining our network. Apparently over at MSNBC, Mika Brzezinski, who does not hide her disdain for the White House and for Kellyanne Conway, has now banned her from appearing on the Morning Joe show. And Mika was attacking CNN for booking the proven liar Kellyanne Conway. But you need to remember, NBC was and probably still is a Hillary Clinton supporter, and is fully on board with getting rid of Trump and finding some way for Hillary to take over that White House, because Russia stole it from her. And Kellyanne Conway, if you're listening, you are always welcome here on this radio show. All right, let's talk about the economy. There is something that is starting to happen which ought to alarm everybody. This is being reported out of Investment Watch blog. The International Monetary Fund, the IMF, is suggesting a 10% tax on all money on deposits in bank throughout Europe. They just want to shave 10% right off the top. In Cyprus, they called it a haircut. IMF is trying to call it a tax. But basically, they're plundering the money of ordinary citizens to keep the banks propped up, to keep the EU propped up. When word of this gets out, people are going to be closing those savings accounts. At which point, the IMF is going to come on back and say, well, that's why we need a cashless society, so that your money is in the bank where we can help ourselves to it whenever we feel we need to. They're trying to legalize the pillage and plunder of ordinary working people, is what's going on. Another article, surging auto loans, boom or bubble. And I think it is a bubble, because the surge in auto loans are in the subprime auto loans. Having learned nothing from the disaster precipitated by the subprime mortgages, they have been doing subprime auto loans. And yes, I think it is a bubble. Bitcoin has soared above 1,800, a new all-time high, and I got to tell you, that to me is looking more and more like a bubble. I think people who are in positions of authority in corporations and government, they're starting to lose their grip on reality, because apparently over at Sears, CEO Edward Lampere was trying to reassure stockholders that Sears is on its way to recovery. And he's saying, we don't need more customers. We have all the customers we could possibly want. And everybody's saying, are you on drugs? And if so, why aren't you sharing them? Sears may have people walking through the store. The question is, are they spending money? And the answer to look at their earnings report is no, they are not. Now, getting on back to the car loan issue, there was this article in the Seattle Times. You're going to love this one. The headline was, Seattle has reversed a decades-long trend of rising car ownership, and millennials are the reason. And the story starts out, for the first time since at least 1970, the percentage of Seattle households that own a car is declining. Census data show it's all because of young people who increasingly are choosing to live carless in the city. And they're trying to pitch this like, this is a good thing. It's going to be fewer cars, less congestion, less pollution. This is really all a very good thing. What they're not talking about in this article is that these young people who are not buying cars are still living with their parents. They can't make enough money to rent a home or buy a home. They're not making enough money to buy cars. This is not a good thing. It's another indicator that our economy is in serious, serious trouble. And the Seattle Times is trying to convince you, oh, yes, it's good. Oh, yes, it's good. Except, obviously, for you car factories and you car dealerships and the auto repair places and the gas stations, you're all going to be in a lot of trouble as car ownership declines. But otherwise, it's a really good thing. This is a wonderful thing that's happening. Now, here is a very interesting article. This is out of teaparty.org. Trump has cut off food stamps for certain classes of people. The headline for this story out of Tea Party is, Real Americans Are Cheering. What's interesting is the very first line of the story says the Department of Agriculture is moving to implement food stamp rules that ban certain convicted criminals and winners of large lottery prizes from getting food stamps. That sounds really good. But further on down is the real meat of the issue. Under the proposed rules, each agency will be required to create an automated system to better determine the immigration status and income of applicants for food stamps. And that is really the heart of the matter. Those are the two areas where most of the food stamp abuse is taking place. People who are actually making money, but enough to live on, but are availing themselves of food stamps, and illegal immigrants who shouldn't be receiving them at all. What was amazing is when this whole open borders immigration refugee thing was cranking up, the Department of Agriculture was just advertising everybody should be on food stamps. Come on over, we'll get you signed on up. Over at Cornell University, somebody apparently issued a fake report of an Immigrations and Customs Enforcement agent on the campus, and the students and faculty went into a panic. Everybody was running, immigration, running around for the thing here. But immigration is actually on the job. They have arrested 1,378 gang members in 6 weeks, which sounds like a good thing. Then, on the other hand, you have the Santa Cruz County Sheriff supporting Sanctuary State Bill out in California, saying it will improve public safety. How does having a sanctuary state where drug criminals, violent offenders are just walking across the border and cannot be removed, how does that improve public safety? We're getting into full-on Orwell speak, newspeak right here. Flooding our country with criminals and rapists increases public safety. They just want you to get used to that as the new normal, like we're seeing over there in Europe, where they're actually moving to decriminalize rape by the migrants because in their culture it's okay to do what they're doing. But they're not in their culture anymore. They're in our culture. Apparently, the European Union has now approved visa-free travel for Ukrainians. They're still trying to get Ukraine to get into that European Union, which is what that whole coup d'etat against Yanukovych was all about. the EU was saying, come on into the EU, it'll be great here, and Yanukovych said, actually, we're kind of getting a better deal from Russia, so we're going to go that way. So boom, go on in, get rid of Yanukovych, put in Poroshenko, Crimea secedes, the Eastern Ukrainian republics try and break away, and what the European Union is actually going to get out of the deal is just an emptied shell of what Ukraine was before all this nonsense began. A lot of people over in France still talking about the election. It's almost common knowledge now that Marine Le Pen was robbed by virtue of all these ballots that were mailed out to French voters with the Marine Le Pen ballot already torn in the envelope. And remember, there was that video of this one gentleman literally videoed himself going into the polling places and stealing the stacks of the Marine Le Pen ballots so nobody could vote for her. They're not even hiding the fact that these elections are rigged. So the globalists got their puppet into France. Amazing. Alrighty, now then. Another day, another fake hate crime. And apparently there was a hate crime at St. Olaf College in Minnesota. There were massive protests after a racist note was left on a student's windshield. And they were making all these demands, you know, racist rhetoric found on campus, students dropped list of demands, yelling plenty of it. And it turns out that the owner of the car put the note there, got caught at it, and he's out there trying to say, I was just trying to raise awareness. No, awareness of what? That there are hoaxes out there? Yeah, we already know that. We know that a lot of these so-called hate crimes are hoaxes for political gain. So, it's a reality, and you got to remember that. Now, here is an interesting little article. This is from the college version of usatoday.com. And basically, they're reporting on how the American Association of University Women basically is looking at the rape data. Now, you know, rape on campus and everything, it's a big thing for the feminist movement. It was a big thing back in the 1990s, the militant feminists. Oh, there's a rape crisis, there's rape hysteria. And they're still doing it today. But what they actually found out was that 89% of America's colleges had reported 0 incidents of rape in 2015. They're still doing the numbers from last year. And then this article goes on to say, well, just because it wasn't reported doesn't mean that there's an epidemic. Most of the girls aren't just, they're not reporting it. They're too ashamed. And just trying to maintain that feminist victimhood agenda, even though the numbers don't actually support it. Now, getting on back to this wonderful book, Who Stole Feminism, by Christine Hobbs Sommers. And she was talking about the rape hysteria in the 1990s and how all these colleges all over the country were setting up these rape crisis centers, and they had funding for some of these feminists to basically have full-time jobs on the staff of these rape crisis centers, and most of them, the vast majority of them, were unused. They were empty. The people working there just got to sit around collecting their paychecks and screaming about the evil male patriarchy, because it didn't really exist. In fact, from the 1990s, looking at the FBI supplemental crime statistics, rape was the second most falsely accused crime in the country. It was an epidemic, and it got so out of hand that Catherine Comins, the assistant dean of student activity at Vassar, actually, in an interview in Time magazine, said a false charge of rape against a man is actually a good thing for him to go through, because it'll force him to confront the reality that he could be a rapist. I mean, that's how bogus and spin all of this stuff gets. Okay, now then, do that here. This is really getting weird out there. Apparently, over in Richmond, this high school, Richmond Early College High School near Rockingham, put out their yearbooks. And if you remember your high school yearbook, there's always a page of quotes by the graduating seniors. And the books went all the way through publication, and apparently only then did the school administrators look at some of the quotes and run them through their PC filter. And some of the quotes were things like, build that wall, which was decried as racist and insensitive to all these illegal immigrants in our high school, and they're recalling and destroying all the yearbooks on that one basis. All right, we're going to take a break for commercials. And when we come on back, I want to share with you a new TV show. It's on demand on most cable systems. And it's an interesting little insight. We'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here. And I want to talk about Stephen Fry has a new TV show out there. It's on most cable networks. It's on demand. It's not scheduled broadcast. You're going to have to search for it. The show is called The Great Indoors. Stephen Fry writes it. He has a small role in it. And the concept of the show is that there is an outdoor magazine which is closing down its paper edition in the modern times and going entirely online. And their main figurehead, who's this explorer who's been around the world, is brought back into the office to interact with the digital age staff to try and set a new direction. And basically, Stephen is sort of expressing his disdain for the current American PC culture. And he's doing it humorously. But for anybody who's actually had to deal with the liberal snowflakes, after a while it gets very tiring because you say, this is what I'm dealing with all the time. It is funny. It's worth a look. Of course, Stephen Fry was also in the news recently. He made a comment about how can you respect a God who allows such evil and suffering in the world, and he was charged under this 1999 blasphemy law in Ireland, rather. And then they dropped the charges because they couldn't find anybody who was actually outraged by what he said. All right, let's grab a couple of phone calls. Ramsey in Canada, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hello, sir. Can you hear me?
I hear you.
See, sir, I just want to ask something. You said the last few minutes talk about sanctuary cities and rape. And see, sir, you said rape is illegal in our culture, but it's rape, but rape is fine in their culture. Are you talking about the Mexicans?
No. I'm talking about what's going on in Europe, where there have been in Germany, where this judge let this refugee, he's a drug trafficker on top of everything else, and he basically attacked this woman for 4 hours, and he got off on the rape charge because the judge said, well, where he comes from, that's just considered rough sex. It's not really considered rape, so we're going to let him go. And a lot of people are just aghast at that. Because if this guy wants to be in a country where he's allowed to do that to women, he should have stayed at home. He's not in his culture anymore. He's in the German culture. And it's just like Teddy Roosevelt said about immigration to the United States of America. You're welcome to come here as long as you understand you are now living in the United States of America. We have certain laws. We have certain cultural norms. We have a language called English. And you are expected to basically adapt and integrate into our society. And instead we have this attitude with the globalists that wherever they send these surges of refugees, their goal is to turn the country they're going into being just like the country that they just left. And I find it weird that going on back to that story about the rape statistics on U.S. college campuses, where they're out there trying to say, oh, rape is a big problem. It's a big problem. We don't have the numbers for it, but it's a big problem. While at the same time over in Europe, where there are numbers showing that this rape is out of control, and they're saying, that's not a big deal. It's just a cultural misunderstanding. And it's like there's no continuity of philosophy behind any of this political correctness.
See, sir, in my opinion, these people who are doing these crimes in Europe or North America, whatever, they know that they're committing rape or assault, but it's just that because of the political correctness, they people on the left would say, oh, it's a cultural misunderstanding, just like you said. But see, sir, I don't think people from that culture are. I don't think rape is like a major feature of the culture, because every country has rape laws, right?
Well, I think pretty much every country does. But see, here's where that whole German argument falls apart. You've probably heard the old expression, ignorance of the law is no excuse. And so in that context, the German judge erred. This refugee clearly violated Germany's rape laws, and he should have been appropriately punished. The fact that he was still out there despite being a drug dealer as well, something has gone really, really wrong. Okay.
He's actually been deported, right?
I don't know what's happened to him. That was the end of the story. We got to let you go. Got to take a break for commercials. We'll be right back. Aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here. I'm looking on Fox News, and they're actually addressing this issue. Could the investigation into Hillary Clinton's email server be reopened? Of course it can. There's no reason it can't. She hasn't gone to trial. She hasn't, double jeopardy doesn't apply. It should be reopened. Catherine Austin Fitts is out there saying maybe what the United States needs is what South Africa went through following the end of apartheid, a Truth and Reconciliation Commission, where they came on out and said, we're going to tell you everything that happened. Nobody's going to go to jail. Nobody's going to get punished. But the people have a right to know what was really going on. I think that's a really good idea. I think that would be a really good idea. The only problem is those individuals who want things to go on just as they are right now. Fox News is also running another story warning that North Korea could knock out Hawaii with an EMP attack. And they start out talking about how back in 1962, the U.S. government set off a nuclear bomb above the atmosphere 850 miles away from Hawaii and just knocked the entire state electrical system down. So they're out there saying, oh, it could happen, it could happen. Well, the largest nuclear weapon North Korea has right now is only 10 kiloton. I don't think they're going to get much of an imp out of that. And considering how often we get blackouts under HECO, I'm not sure anybody would notice if North Korea did. Okay. We're going to take a phone call. Alex in San Antonio. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind? Alex, are you there? Okay. Apparently we do not have Alex.
Hello?
Yeah, there you are. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
I was calling because I wanted to know what you thought about a couple of points. Number one is it's been a month, and of all the war rhetoric that has been spoken, nothing has come of it. So I was wondering what you thought. Trump kind of, played them with one of the for lack of a better term, played a trump card and made them kind of show their hand. One, and the second thing I wanted to ask you was the dance that's going on with Bitcoin and the currencies and gold. Do you perhaps think that they're building up Bitcoin to stash a lot of the inflated dollars in? And lastly, I wanted to ask you a question regarding the Trump Care thing. Do you think that this whole because what I find a difficulty reconciling is how an aspirin costs 50 cents at a store or a pharmacy, but it costs $50 in an emergency room. So what I'm thinking is perhaps the healthcare system is masking or hiding a lot of the inflation that they just can't put in other bubbles. I'll take my answers off the air, Mike. Thank you very much. I appreciate it. Have a great weekend.
All right. Aloha. Well, thank you very much here. And to address your first point, the rhetoric against both Syria and North Korea has faded, which may signify only that the government is aware that they're not winning over public support for any more wars. Doesn't necessarily mean they're not planning another horrific false flag and an invasion of Syria. It doesn't mean that they're not going to attack North Korea. Obviously, this Fox News story about here in Hawaii, there's still a little bit of mention, but it has been de-emphasized. There's no question about that. Now, as far as the Trump Care issue, there is no question that hospitals have huge markups on everything, aspirins, Band-Aids, and it's a way of ramping up their profitability. And again, it all goes back to the Richard Nixon administration, where they legalized the, first of all, the idea of the health maintenance organization and allowed medical care to be run for profit. Prior to that, medical care was basically run at your cost, and a little margin. In order to keep health care affordable to everybody, doctors and hospitals and providers were not allowed to exploit the people's illness and fear of dying to charge them huge prices. And that was a system that really did work. But then they mucked it all up with, taking the limits off, as it were, and medical care became a for-profit enterprise in the United States of America. And what is going on with the hospitals has to do with the relationship with the health insurance companies. Because when you reach an agreement with a health insurance provider at a hospital, the health insurance provider will demand a steep discount for what they're paying for. They're going to say, we only want to pay 50 cents for an aspirin or whatever. And so the hospitals will inflate the price of everything that they're doing so that when they give the health insurance companies the discount, it comes back down to what the hospitals would have been charging anyway. The problem is for those who are without health insurance or who are still under the deductible of their health insurance, they're being forced to pay those inflated prices. Now, I don't know that it necessarily is a cash sink to hide inflation, because that cash that goes into the medical industrial complex comes back someplace else. The same thing with your question about Bitcoin versus gold and silver. The idea that they're hiding inflated dollars in the Bitcoin works only so long as Bitcoin continues to increase in value. If there is a crash, all of that could be wiped out. And maybe that's their goal, to get rid of inflation, is to put it someplace where it gets destroyed, so it doesn't have to be calculated. But the reality is that by its very nature, private central banking creates inflation. They have a polite word for it. It's called monetizing the debt, which means creating new money, part of which is paying the interest and principal on the old money. And as the debt grows and grows, the money supply is supposed to keep up with it. But it's still a pyramid scheme. And sooner or later, all pyramid schemes will collapse. Okay. Moving on here, let's see. Apparently, speaking of Bitcoin, Reddit users lose real money after the meme currency bot dies. And this is another cryptocurrency mess up. The creator of the tipping bot, Do Get Tip Bot, I think it was called. It's a service that lets Reddit users tip each other in Dogecoin. And apparently the company is now broke. He is broke. And the bot is broke because he has spent all the coins after he ran out of money. It's an epic tech failure. We're putting too much of our lives on those little boxes. We really, really are here. Now, Trump has signed a cybersecurity executive order. And here are the high points. Tom Bossert, President Trump's Homeland Security advisor, made the announcement yesterday afternoon and basically said the three most important sections of the EO are to protect federal networks using the NIST framework. If you're not inside the federal network, you're on your own. They're mandating moving the federal IT to the cloud. That one's got a lot of people scratching their head, given that the cloud has still got issues and it's not robust. And here's the one that is really going to mess things up. They want all federal IT centralized as a single enterprise network. All of the government's computers as one giant enterprise network. And boy, I would hate to be the systems integration person on that one. Do you remember a while back when the government decided they wanted a standardized computer language for all government computers, and they came up with a new computer language called Aiea, named after Lady Ada Lovelace, who was the programmer for Carl Babbage's calculating machine. And Aiea itself, trying to be all things to all people, was a horrible, horrible language. And basically what ultimately happened is all the government's computers, they were doing mostly just applying for waivers. I can't convert to Aiea because of this. And so that went away. That is going to be a monster problem. And again, if you're on a centralized federal IT network, all on one enterprise, what happens if that WannaCry ransomware gets in there, it's going to affect everything. Maybe that wouldn't be such a bad thing. Alrighty, a little bit of good news for people on a tight food budget. Coming out of the Texas Panhandle, they have been examining their wheat crop following the late snow and freeze that we just went through. And they're basically saying that the vast majority of the wheat is still undamaged. They lost some, but not a huge amount, which means we're not going to be seeing too much increase in price for wheat-based products here. Now, as we mentioned the other day, the federal government has released financial settlement figures from the Vaccine Injury Court, which is going to end this claim that vaccines never harm anyone. Now, the vaccine court is biased against the victims and in favor of the vaccine manufacturers. They're there to protect them. And the vaccine court is still using this discredited CDC report that claims there's no link between autism and vaccines. And even the lead author of the paper at the CDC has come on out and said it was a hoax, it was a fake. They cherry-picked the data to get the desired result. Apparently, they changed the methodology for the paper something like 17 times until they could get the result they wanted from the cherry-picked data. It was a hoax. It was a fraud. And the vaccine court is still using it. And despite that, they had to pay out a huge amount of money to people being harmed by vaccines. And the vaccine industry is apparently getting very, very nervous. Because over at the Boston Herald, they're running these editorials, these op-ed pieces, just denouncing anybody who could even doubt the safety of vaccines, could even question the wisdom of having mercury in the vaccines. And the Boston Herald's entire editorial staff is openly calling for essentially the mass execution of scientists, naturopaths, chiropractors, and journalists who dare question the safety of injecting children with mercury. They even went so far as to say that expressing any concern at all about the ingredients in vaccines, quote, ought to be a hanging offense, end quote. Now, remember that story we had about a week or so ago when the H1N1 flu was making its rounds? Angela Merkel and her top officials in Germany got a special version of the vaccine that did not have any adjuvants, none of the additives. No mercury, no peanut oil, none of that. The people of Germany were required to take the H1N1 vaccine with all the adjuvants. Now, obviously, if Angela Merkel knows that she shouldn't be taking those adjuvants, obviously you shouldn't be taking those adjuvants. And we know they cause harm. The epidemic of peanut anaphylaxis in our population is a direct result of using peanut oil as an adjuvant. Now, peanut oil is something you're supposed to eat and digest, not inject directly into the tissues of your body. That, too, is completely out of control. Completely out of control. Here's an interesting story, and I love this. It's from Natural News. Apparently, there was this academic institute who developed a new malaria cure, and they were very proud of it, and huzzah, huzzah, we're going to be rich and famous. And then somebody pointed out that the exact same cure had been described in a Chinese medicine text written over 500 years ago. I think that puts it squarely in the public domain. I love this one. District Attorney Bonnie Dumanis has been ordered to return more than $100,000 seized from a medical marijuana businessman and his family 15 months after drug agents raided the company and did not charge anyone with a crime. And so down in San Diego, businessman James Static is arguing before the court. It's time for the money to be returned, and the judge agreed. Well, you remember that video where this legal marijuana dispensary was being raided because it competed with another one that was good friends with the mayor? And the cops thought they'd disabled all the security cameras. They hadn't. There were two independent systems. And the security cameras caught the cops helping themselves to the marijuana goodies. Oh, we're going to have fun. We're going to have fun. They do think like that. Drugs are bad for you. It's okay for us. I remember when I was going to Cal State Fullerton, the best drug connection around that campus was a California Highway Patrol officer. He was confiscating the stuff from the dealers and then reselling it out the back of his black and white unit. And he quit the CHP and he bought himself a Radio Shack franchise. And we were good buddies. That was back when Radio Shack was a lot more fun to go to. I was talking before about the prison labor industry and how it really is the moral equivalent of the slave labor camps they had in Nazi Germany. And over at this story at returntonow.net, they're talking about how if you are doing business with these 50 companies who run these prison factories, you are supporting modern American slavery. And as I mentioned before, more than that, you are harming your local economic community. Because if you are buying, for example, furniture produced in a prison factory because it's cheaper than American furniture factories who are employing legal American citizens, go out of business. And that is really something we should avoid, especially when you consider that 86% of the prisoners who are slaving away in these prison factories are there for non-violent, victimless crimes. Like they got caught smoking a joint or something. We have a new institution of slavery emerging in the middle of our culture, and we need to take a look at that. Now, over in Europe, as you know, there's been a big issue where the European Union has imposed rather strict requirements for produce in the markets. It all has to be the same shape, the same size, and just absolute uniformity. Over in France, a supermarket has gone the other way. They're celebrating what they call the ugly produce. We are selling produce that does not comply with the EU regulations, and it's all twisted and bent and lumpy, and people are just snapping the stuff up. It's been an absolutely stunning marketing success, and even better, it means there's less food wastage. That's a good idea. All right, we're going to take a break for commercials. We'll be right back. Actually, we're going to leave the phone lines closed here because we got a lot of news to talk about here. And somebody just wrote on in reminding us that James Comey was a lawyer on the Senate Whitewater investigation looking into the conduct of President Bill Clinton and First Lady Hillary Clinton. And the investigation was to determine whether Clinton used his political position as governor of Arkansas to push through an illegal loan to benefit Bill and Hillary's business partner in Whitewater. Several people involved in Whitewater went to jail, but no prosecution for Bill and Hillary. And James Comey was the deputy special counsel for the Whitewater investigation. So yeah, it goes all the way back to Arkansas, all the way back to the Operation Screwworm, which was one of the code names for the gun and drug running operation down to Nicaragua. All right, a little bit of science news to fill out this hour here as we wait for the lovely Lady Claire. Curiosities, it's doing a wonderful job up there in Mars. It's got some problems. Apparently, the drill is in hiatus due to an issue with a motor that moves the rover's drill. In other words, it broke down. At one point, they thought it was actually jammed in the ground, and Curiosity was not going to be able to move. But apparently, they dislodged it. But basically, Curiosity is mostly scooping sand and analyzing while the space agency tries to sort things out. Actually, from the context of this, it sounds like maybe it is still stuck in the ground. That would be an absolute, absolute shame. Curiosity has seen so many things that I wish they would go back and take a look at. Like that thing that looked like a dead tree stump sticking out of this sand wall. I think it's called the Mars crab, but it looks more like a tree stump to me. If I were running Curiosity, I would definitely go on back and take a look at that. Curiosity's found so many things that seem to indicate the presence of life. fossilized algae mats, all kinds of things like that. Apparently, China is planning some serious space travel, and apparently they're considering a long-duration trip to the moon, and they've already got volunteers are going to live in a simulated space cabin for 200 days. Now, obviously, since it's only 3 days up and 3 days back to the moon, more or less, they're talking about setting up something on the moon that's going to last there for a long, long time. And they're not the only ones. Apparently, NASA is considering a long-duration lunar facility as a training and jump-off point for an eventual manned mission to Mars. Now, part of the problem is they're discovering it. As you've heard, some new endurance records have been set for astronauts on the International Space Station. They're finding out that there are some physiological changes from weightlessness that exercise can't seem to deal with. And I think at this point we're looking at the inevitability that any spaceship going to Mars is going to have at least one component that is a spinning centrifuge. And we've certainly seen it in movies like that. Because we evolved on a world with gravity. And I think our best course for preserving the health of our astronauts is they have to be living in gravity. End of story. We're going to take a break. We'll be back with the Lady Claire after these few words. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here, hour number 3. And for those of you watching on BAM User, this gorgeous creature sitting beside me is the lovely Lady Claire, who likes to come on in on our Fridays, third hour, with her unique perspective on the world. So what do you want to talk about first?
Well, the first thing I want to do is a shout-out to Republic Broadcast Network itself in terms of this fundraising drive. And folks, this is really serious. I wish, and everyone at RBN wishes, that we could just survive on advertising, etc., etc., but no. Where else are you going to get the quality and integrity of programming? Nowhere. What the programming on RBN does is give you the opportunity to be what I would call a 7-day awareness. Understanding what is going on and knowing in context what you have to do to take care of yourself, take care of your family. Where do you find that on any other radio network or any other radio show? The short answer is you don't. So I am personally asking you to please phone on in to RBN, and the number is 800-724-2719, and donate, or use PayPal on RBN's website, and you're going to see that at www.republicbroadcasting.org, and the address for postal contributions is on the website.
That's in Round Rock, Texas.
Yeah, definitely. And Mike, the first thing that I want to talk about is some statements made by former Secretary of State Condoleezza Rice.
Right. She's back again.
She's back. Oh, yes, she is. And she spoke at a meeting at the Brookings Institution, a D.C. think tank, and she used the phrase, security, not democracy, was the real motivating factor when she was serving in Bush's administration. And she went on to say it was a security problem. Now, Mike, I've got to hand it to Condoleezza. When this lady doubles down on disseminating bovine excrement, she really doubles down.
Well, so, I mean, she's basically back to this thing about we had to invade Iraq because of the nuclear weapons of mass destruction, and even though it turned out they didn't exist, we believe they existed, and our belief that the weapons were there justified our invasion of Iraq. And no, of course, it didn't. When you invade a country on the basis of bad information, you have committed a war crime.
Yeah, and I have a word for Secretary Rice. The world knows that she is lying, and yet she continues to lie about the real motivations for both wars. She used the word security when what she meant was economic security.
Yes.
Because, as Karl Marx once noted, all wars are really economic in their origins.
Well, the real cause of the Iraq War was Iraq's requesting permission from the United Nations to sell Iraq's oil for the euro instead of the dollar.
Right.
And the United Nations said perfectly okay under the Food for Oil program.
Yeah.
And that was what prompted this emergency meeting between Tony Blair and George Bush, basically 1 year before the war actually started.
Right.
And so that was where the decision was made. We have to go into Iraq and smash up the place and make sure their oil is sold only for the U.S. dollar.
And it's that simple. And because the world understands that you are lying through your teeth about these issues, you, Secretary Rice, are never going to be believed in anything you say ever again, even if what you happen to say is accidentally the truth.
That's always the danger. When you're caught lying, a government that is caught lying to the people reaches a point where the people aren't going to believe the government, even on those rare occasions when the government is actually telling the truth. Governments have in past actually paralyzed their ability to operate by losing the trust and confidence of their people. And it's happening in this country.
I'd like to turn over to a very important issue that's getting zero coverage in the U.S. The Palestinian hunger strike has taken a dramatic turn, and this comes from Press TV, which is an Iranian web outlet in English. And apparently more Palestinian prisoners are joining the mass hunger strike, which entered its 26th day today. And a lot of them seem to be on it or willing to join it. And the radio, Sat al-Asra, Voice of Prisoners, said that nearly 100 Palestinian inmates from different political factions decided to join. The radio estimates that are there say that nearly 1,800 prisoners are currently participating in the strike. However, the Palestinian Prisoners Club puts the number far higher, saying that more than 3,000 are actually striking. Now, of course, the Israeli authorities are poo-pooing this. And what has happened has been the Fatah Central Committee, considered by the Palestinian movement's top decision-making body, called on Thursday for all of its members in Israeli prisons to join the hunger strike immediately.
Okay, now what they're trying to do is they're trying to do a Gandhi. And the difference, unfortunately, when Gandhi was doing his fasting to the point of death, it got a lot of media play, not just within India to the Indian people, but around the world, and it generated sympathy. But as Claire pointed on out, in our era of controlled media, this is getting no coverage at all on the corporate media. Zero. And so we have to make a big stink about it. And all the Palestinians are protesting is the unfair treatment. They're being thrown into prison without any just cause, without a trial.
They're political prisoners.
They're political prisoners.
I mean, that's the bottom line here.
And it just underscores the excessively cruel treatment Israel dishes out to the apartheid population. No different than what happened down in South Africa during the apartheid era.
Right.
And we're seeing it all over again. All right, we're going to do a quick shout-out now to our on-air affiliates who are just now rejoining our network. And what's next on your list of things to...
Well, I'd like to talk a little bit about this a little more and then go on to my next. When the Israeli guards start losing these men to either malnutrition or gastronasal forced feeding gone wrong, Mike, I think the excrement is going to hit the ventilation system big time, both within the prisons and within both Israel and Palestine. And I would like to suggest to Prime Minister Netanyahu, the world is watching the outcome of these hunger strikes. And I'm asking you, sir, not to do anything utterly foolish with the fates of these political prisoners.
I'll tell you something that did not happen, did not help the situation, were these settlers who literally set up a barbecue right outside the prison.
I heard about that.
Yeah, so that the smell of the food would go on in and just torment them. And it basically displays a character that is mean, vindictive, and petty, and bordering on inhumane. And Israel right now is very much worried about its public image around the world. These kinds of things are not helping at all.
No, definitely not. And I know that you covered some of this a little earlier in the show, but regarding the hacking and ransomware, the FBI gives Hollywood hacking victims surprising advice: pay the ransom. Apparently it hit Netflix, agencies, and other media organizations are winding up getting their sites hacked, like UTA, And, for example, UTA on April 11th found out that there was an intruder lurking in the voicemail system and computer network and quickly decided to shut them down, sending agents to conduct business on their iPads. And very soon after, there was a hacker demand which arrived. Pay a ransom or watch the agency's most confidential data get posted online. And, Mike, the question I have is, in all of this pain, particularly when I was seeing what was happening with the British hospitals, which is, immoral and inhuman, people's lives can...
You're endangering patients' lives, yes.
And where is the great and grand NSA in all of this to champion we the people suffering from epidemic hacking attacks? Nowhere to be found. Nowhere whatsoever.
In the case of WannaCry, the NSA has got egg all over its face because it was... The NSA actually developed one of the elements currently being used in WannaCry that's going around the world right now. I mean, the numbers are just skyrocketing, and you all have to be careful about attachments to emails. What's really interesting, this other story that Claire's talking about, this is a completely different hack.
Right.
And we're seeing that where hackers get into a company, they get the confidential data, and they say, pay us a ransom or we will post it in places where you don't want it to appear. And this idea of the FBI saying pay the ransom, that's actually been their advice all along, going all the way back to when the ransomware problem first appeared. That's always been the advice of the FBI. Just go ahead and pay the ransom. We can't do a thing about it.
And I have to wonder, Mike, do you think it's possible there are elements of NSA that are actually doing the hacks to perfect their tools?
Well, or to just make a fast buck here.
Yeah.
I mean, if you look at the number of infections of WannaCry, and the ransom is $300 per ransom, they're already into like $3-4 million in instant wealth here. But we do know that Kaspersky identified the Equation Group hacker cartel as being part of the NSA.
Yeah.
So yes, a lot of this cybercrime and hacking is probably these agencies either training, perfecting their tools, or they're just going on out and using their tools to line their own pockets. Edward Snowden is saying that the NSA data centers house the greatest collection of privately produced amateur porn on the entire planet. That NSA has just gone into computers and
I shouldn't laugh, but I am.
They steal the pictures that people are making of each other in their playtime, and they have them for their own personal amusement, to put it delicately.
Yes, yes. I'd like to go on to this whole thing about Russia hacking the election, and there has been a book that's come out recently called Shattered. And they came up with a revelation that the Clinton campaign hatched the Russian hacking narrative 24 hours after Clinton. And when she finally accepted that she had lost, she was blaming the FBI investigations, Russian interference, and Trump's supposed support from white nationalists. And then the author went on to detail how Clinton went out of her way to pass blame for her stunning loss on Comey and Russia. She wanted to make sure all these narratives get spun the right way, a longtime Clinton confidant is quoted.
In other words, we're going to lie.
Yeah.
We're going to lie.
Exactly. And the book further highlights how Clinton's Russia blame game was a plan hatched by senior campaign staffers John Podesta and Robbie Mook, less than within 24 hours after she had conceded. Now, Mike, in my perception, this only could have been the Frankensteinian brainchild of people who were collectively and pathologically incapable of taking responsibility for Clinton's loss.
Well, that's always been the hallmark of Clinton, the Clintons and their associates. Anything that goes wrong, it's somebody else's fault. We never do anything wrong. They're pure sociopaths in their mindset. And Hillary Clinton apparently thought that between the election fraud and everything else and the media coverage, that she had the election locked. She did not even have a concession speech prepared. And normally when you're in an election, you will prepare two speeches, an acceptance and a concession. And she had her acceptance speech all out there saying, you will bow down and worship me. But she did not actually have a concession speech. That's how overconfident she was. It clearly hit her as an absolute shock that we, the American people, just don't like her and her politics. And we remember all the dark shadows that hang over the Clinton cartel.
Well, she lost this election for some very solid reasons. First, she stole the Democratic nomination from Sanders. Second, she has more baggage than Kim Kardashian on a photo shoot, and will undoubtedly go down in history as one of the most thoroughly corrupt politicians in this country's history. Third, she has the nauseating stench of entitlement and inevitability, which just reeks out of every pore when she speaks.
And that was a tremendous turnoff for people. She alienated Democrats who supported Bernie Sanders, to the point where they're still trying to sue the DNC for a refund of all the money they donated in their belief that they were supporting Bernie Sanders. And believe it or not, the lawyer for the DNC is arguing these Bernie Sanders supporters should have known we were going to make Hillary the nominee, and therefore they don't have grounds to sue.
Yeah, right. And, lastly, she's a consummate warmonger who absolutely doesn't have the temperament for the job of president. And the bottom line here is she was damaged goods before she stole the nomination from Sanders, and the Democratic National Committee had better wrap their heads around this reality, and soon, or else it's going to be positioning itself for even more massive losses in elections ahead, no matter how good their vote rigging might be.
Well, that was sort of a subtle message that Donald Trump sent out when he signed the executive order forming this new election integrity commission. And they are focusing very much on what happened last year. I think they ought to focus on the system as a whole. But he's sending a message to the Democrats. Playtime is over.
Yeah, absolutely. Like to go back over to Israel, and apparently Benjamin Netanyahu is waging a war on press freedom there. On Tuesday, he shuttered Israeli Broadcasting Authority with less than 2 hours' notice. And in doing that, he ended a near half-century of public broadcasting, which had been a staple on Israeli television. Its first news program, Aiea, to be replaced by Israeli Public Broadcasting Corporation. And in its final night, this was so bad for the hosts, the anchors wept openly. Journalists blasted the shutdown on air, and the final broadcast ended with staff singing Hatikva, which is Israel's national anthem, which sounded more like a dirge than a national anthem because they were really hurt by how it was done. And it's very obvious to me that Netanyahu doesn't like the free press because he cannot control it. And in my view, Mike, what is left of it in Israel appears to be fading away exponentially, which is very much to Netanyahu's liking.
Well, it's not just in Israel. Netanyahu's trying to get rid of a free press all over the world, and even here in the United States of America. Now, most of our corporate media is very much co-opted by Israel's propaganda agenda. The independent media is a constant target of Israel. They're screaming we're a bunch of anti-Semites, and because, again, when you have rulers who rule with lies, fraud, and deception, to them, telling the truth is an act of treason.
Yeah. And unfortunately, in this portion of the 21st century, it's reasonable to state that the Israeli experiment in democracy has died, assassinated by an unwillingness to deal honestly with the questions of an independent Palestine, its development of a massive police state, and having become an horrifically apartheid theocracy with nuclear. Now, another little story about Israel that we did not hear much about, heard it in Sputnik. Apparently, this last week, and set to continue, U.S. fighter pilots are set to fly Israeli skies to join joint aircraft drills. The Army has confirmed that Israeli and U.S. pilots will be engaging in these drills this week at Uvda Air Force Base near the Israeli city of Eilat. They will be trained in a number of exercises, while other squadrons will train in the Negev desert. And while the role of enemy aircraft will be played by the Israeli Defense Forces, the team will operate enemy missiles and radars, etc., and that a number of F-15 fighters have already been sent over to there to begin. But, Mike, I've got to wonder what the potential targets here are. Right now, were I a betting person, I would say either Iran, Syria, or Lebanon. What do you think?
Well, we're seeing indications of a potential all-out invasion of Syria.
Yeah.
And Israel's going to want to secure their borders, especially that border going around the north part of the Golan. And I would say that probably this is what they're preparing to do, is to protect Israel from fallout from the Syrian invasion,
right.
Even though Israel was materialistically involved in creating all of this problem in Syria in the first place.
Yeah. But the problem here for them that I can foresee, stretched out on the Bösendorfer piano and napping for the moment, is the 6,000-pound gorilla in the living room. And that is the presence of Russia in Syria and Russia's oft-stated promise to assist Iran militarily should a foreign government attempt to invade it. And I don't know what these people in the bowels of power in this unhinged states of America and Tel Aviv are thinking. To even be moving in this direction is collective hubris madness.
Well, this is where we get on back to Paul Craig Roberts' comments in his article. He keeps insisting that his sources within the U.S. government are planning a nuclear first strike on Russia. We got to take a break for commercials. We'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here. Watching on the cable news here. Rex Tillerson is apparently launching another political spitball, if you will, at Russia,
yep.
Saying that relations with Russia are getting worse and worse and worse. And he's basically saying Russia is refusing to cooperate with the United States.
What?
In other words, basically the U.S. State Department's issue with Russia is Russia won't do what they're being told to do by the United States. And Rex is sort of taking the attitude that, of course, Russia should just go along with what we want to do. We're the United States of America. And, of course, Putin has other ideas because he understands the end of the current U.S. agenda is the loss of sovereignty for Russia, China, and pretty much the rest of the world.
Mm-hmm.
So Rex is out there. He's building up more confrontation with Russia, which is very worrying in light of Paul Craig Roberts' repeated warnings of a nuclear first strike. And again, they need to make it look like this is Russia's fault. That Russia is to blame for all of this. That, gosh darn it, those Russians, they won't do what we tell them to do, and therefore we now have a right to just launch nuclear weapons at them. Which I don't like hearing that. Sitting out here in the middle of the Pacific,
yeah.
we got a first strike target right out that window there.
Yep, we sure do.
We really do.
I'd like to get a little closer to home in terms of problems with health that are being caused by immigrants and refugees. Apparently, the state of Minnesota now needs $5 million to fight infectious diseases in their immigrant population. And, maybe former President Obama could contribute his last speaking fee of about $3 million as a partial payment to handle the crisis.
Oh, that would be wonderful for Obama to do that. I mean,
yeah.
After all, he made this mess. It
yes.
would be the honorable thing to do.
Yes,
and
it would.
We'll see that probably on the same day they open that new skating rink in the dark places.
Yes, or when pigs fly. The latest news generated by the recent measles epidemic in Minnesota, as of Tuesday, there were 50 diagnosed cases. Most 45 are from the Somali community. And we get told that refugees don't cost state and local taxpayers a dime. And this following information comes from Michael Leahy at Breitbart. Minnesota Health Commissioner Dr. Ed Erlinger sounded an alert on more frequent and costly threats to the public health, referencing measles, TB, Zika, syphilis. Oh, that's a nasty list.
It's pronounced Zika here.
Okay.
And what's really alarming, especially with the tuberculosis, it is drug resistant.
Yeah.
It is contagious, and it is basically untreatable.
Right.
And the American population are very much at risk because tuberculosis was eradicated from this country decades ago, and our current generation has no immunity for it.
Yeah. And but I have a reasonable plan. I think all of these ill immigrants should be mandated to only be allowed to live on the properties of those congressional representatives and other federal officials who approved allowing them into this country so that they have a close-up and personal first-hand knowledge of the intended consequences of welcoming really sick people into the
It's really a lot of fun to do is to go up to one of these open borders people and just say, when are you going to take a refugee into your home? And then just watch their face.
Oh, yeah.
There's entertainment value in that right
definitely.
there. That's a lot of fun.
Yeah. I want to go over to India and Pakistan. Unfortunately, that situation around Kashmir is starting to heat up again. Apparently, 2 civilians have been killed on either side of the disputed border between India and Pakistan in Kashmir. And this thing could get so out of control. There are moments to me, Mike, when it looks like this madness between India and Pakistan, both nuclear-armed countries, will never end, and that a nuclear confrontation may be inevitable. And until and unless this is sorted, I would like to see all foreign aid to these countries, except for food and medicine, stopped internationally. No more weapons, nothing but food and medical care. The Kashmiri people deserve and need a referendum to decide if they want to stay with India, become part of Pakistan, or be an independent country. But until and unless this happens, Mike, the loss of innocent civilian lives is going to continue, and this is awful.
All right, we're going to take another break for commercials. We'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. And before we go back to the Lady Claire, we're watching on the news here again. Apparently there's a war of words building between Donald Trump and former FBI Director James Comey. And the gist of it is that Comey is apparently threatening to release or leak the evidence, which doesn't exist, of Trump's connection to Russia. They are desperate to keep the focus off the investigation into Hillary Clinton's email server and the Clinton Foundation. And they are so desperate, it's calling attention to itself. Mm-hmm. You know, look over here, look over here. You know,
desperation on the cusp of madness. Never a good thing.
We'll set a dog on fire. Just don't look over at the email server over there. All right, so back to you.
As if things could not get more difficult for the poor people of Yemen who are experiencing genocide, courtesy of the Saudi bombing of it, southern Yemen leaders are now launching a secessionist bid. There has been a former Aden governor, Aidarus Zubaydi, who has announced that they are launching a formal movement for the secession of South Yemen, making the announcement with the flag of the former country. Now, going back in history, it was conquered by North Yemen in 1994, and under Ali Abdullah Saleh. Saleh ruled until 2012, when Abdul Rabu Mansour Hadi was appointed to replace him. And by the way,
that was the successful U.S. intervention into Yemen.
And guess how many names were on the ballot when al-Hadi ran?
One.
Okay.
No vote fraud needed in that one.
Yeah. The northern Yemen is controlled by the Shiite Houthi movement now, while the Saudi-backed forces of Hadi rule the south, with the country once again split largely along the historical border. There has always been some southern nationalism within Yemen, and the war's presence de facto has split the country back. So, dear House of Saud, the Saudi government and the government of the unhinged States of America, welcome to the wonderful world of unintended geopolitical consequences.
I wouldn't make that leap just yet, because the question is, which of the two Yemens on either side of that split has all the oil? Because that's really what the U.S. wants to control.
Right.
And they may just decide, well, if the oil is all there in the South and we're already in control of the South, we'll just say, okay, we're going to have a secession, and the Houthis can have that little sliver of empty desert and dirt, and we'll get control of the oil.
Yep. I think it's in the South. I'm tap dancing on that. But
I'll have to look at a map.
Yeah, right. Apparently, from a standpoint of aircraft carriers, Trump has rejected digital catapults and demands a return to steam. And there was an interview in Time magazine, and President Trump revealed an exchange during a recent tour of the USS Gerald Ford, an aircraft carrier, during which he discovered that newer carriers are using digital catapult systems for launching aircraft. He was apparently livid with the discovery, saying that it sounded bad to him, and demanding that the aircraft carriers go back to using steam for their launches, claiming it would save hundreds of millions of dollars. There's no evidence to support the money-saving suggestion, and the switch to the digital emails launchers was seen by the Navy as a necessary one. Steam-based launchers, which use the steam produced by the carrier's nuclear power plant, are described as high-maintenance systems with no feedback control. And it's a problem. And so, President...
Well, before you go into the thing here, there's a bias built in here into this article because they're talking about it just sounds bad to him. That's not how you make the decision. The reality is these digital catapults are magnetic rail guns.
Okay.
And they do have problems with being able to control them. They've had a problem with these the catapults on the Gerald R. Ford actually fracturing the launching attachments on the aircraft. They've had a problem with them launching aircraft so fast that if the aircraft are carrying wing tanks or excessive ordnance loads, it can cause a problem with the wings.
Okay.
The advantage of a steam catapult is it's an established known technology, and they just know the number that they have to dial to for any given configuration of aircraft. This system is supposed to be automated where it decides for itself how much force to apply to the airframe based on the airframe configuration and its weapons and tanks loadout, but apparently it's not working very well. They're still working on the software. The reality is that these magnetic rail catapults are much more expensive than the steam systems, and they still don't have them working. And I'm kind of glad to see that Donald Trump is being very critical of this system because we had been talking about the Gerald R. Ford and statements by people in the Navy that it may never actually be usable in real combat because of all the high-tech whiz-bang and all the problems. And then, of course, Trump was on there doing a speech about huzzah, huzzah, the Navy and the military and our newest carrier, but apparently he wasn't taken in by the presentation that he was given. Frankly, if the main reason they wanted the magnetic catapults was the steam catapults take up a lot of vertical room underneath the flight deck, and they wanted to be able to get rid of that for the much thinner magnetic rail system in order to have more room on the flight deck and possibly even lower the flight deck a little bit to lower its radar profile. But again, this is something that should have been perfected in ground-based testing, a ground-based setup, long before it was considered to be put into an active combat warship.
So they signed off on it before it was actually really rock solid, right?
Well, they've been doing that all along with all these weapons. They go on in and say, we're going to have this, we're going to have that, and they just push the contracts through. We're even seeing that here with our light rail system, where they're having to replace all of the columns that are going to support the stations where you get on and off the train, because the contracts for the columns were awarded before the design for the stations was finalized, and now it's realized they're far heavier than was expected. So we see a lot of that in the military-industrial complex. Again, we've got the F-35. It's onboard cannon. The software still doesn't work. Now they're saying that it actually shakes so bad it could damage the wing root. So their solution is put a gun in a pod underneath the belly, adding to the weight, reducing maneuverability. Just like they did with the old F-4, which was actually built without a cannon because they figured the missiles would be invincible. Turned out not to work. We have seen so many of these weapons that are boondoggles, and Trump is absolutely right, especially when you're talking about going into combat. You want something that is simple, reliable, easy to fix. Not a complex system that one little hack can take it down, like happened to the USS Donald Cook. I remember when you and I were given that behind-the-scenes tour on the Missouri. What really impressed me was the way it had been set up and designed so that any damage anywhere inside the armored core, the Citadel, there were plugs and cables pre-positioned where you could route around and just fix things, just instantaneously. And we seem to have lost that simple is better wisdom with our newer weapons, and that's why they cost so much and why they're less than effective.
I'd like to talk a little bit about South Korean President-elect Moon. He wants to limit U.S. sanctions on the North, and he's been engaged in conversations with leaders from around the world, and today insisted that he only wants to see sanctions imposed against North Korea done in parallel to negotiations with them. Now, this guy is a sunshine policy advocate, looking at engaging with North Korea, becoming more involved with North Korea, and avoiding, if humanly possible, a military confrontation. Now, Michael, I can almost guarantee you, and I would almost bet this approach will not be to the liking of those in the bowels of power in the unhinged states of America.
Well, they've got a little bit of a problem because once he is sworn in as president of South Korea, If he says, I want you, the United States of America, to pull your weapons out of my country, what is the United States going to do? Turn around and reinvade South Korea so that they can then be free to invade North Korea? Moon has already said he's going to do that. He's going to say South Korea will take care of its defense against North Korea, and the way we're going to do that is we're going to defuse the tensions and go back to being friends with them, which is obviously the best solution. And obviously the war hawks want something else. So we could see Moon assassinated, or we could see a false flag missile launch into South Korea blamed on North Korea. Remember when they tried to frame North Korea for the sinking of the Chia-san?
And the missile was the wrong type.
Torpedo.
Torpedo was the wrong type.
Yeah, they tried to say, here's a blueprint of the torpedoes used by North Korea, and here's what we brought it from the ocean. See, it's round on the front, it has a propeller on the back, it's obviously the same weapon. And then looking closely at the steering actuators on the tail, it was very obviously not the same weapon. So we could see something like that. We have a government that is just absolutely desperate to get the war agenda back on track, and there is absolutely nothing they will not do to get there.
I also mentioned what you just stated in my notes, a decap strike against Moon, or to be blamed on some lone nut assassin, or the false flag. And to the best of my knowledge, Michael, and I need to ask you on this, has the firepower from the Navy gone away from the Korean Peninsula?
As far as I know, they're still there.
Still sitting there.
They're still there making stink face.
You know, that's a lot of hardware and a lot of people to have on this instant readiness, get them, be able to function on a hair trigger. Very emotionally difficult.
Yeah, that is true. You can wear down the efficiency of a combat crew by having them on battle stations at all time. Now, at this point, they're not on battle stations. In theory, it is still a training exercise with Japan.
Right.
But again, there's a finite amount of time you can keep an armada on station without doing anything.
Yeah. And would you say that we are coming to that time?
I would say that we'd probably be there in another maybe 2 months. We would be seeing serious degradation of efficiency in the crew.
Yeah. And so I have a word for President Moon. Whatever personal security he has around him, he'd probably better double or treble it. Unfortunately, the American deep state is perfectly comfortable playing the frenemy card. And I hope that he's sleeping in his Kevlar undies.
I mean, we have a long history of the U.S. supporting somebody and then turning on them. The United States helped Saddam Hussein into power, and then when Saddam stopped doing what he was told, they took him out of power.
Yeah. And it's a very routine thing for elements of the deep state to do in this country. I'd like to go to another very disturbing article. Apparently, they are finding Roundup in vaccines.
The glyphosate.
Glyphosate. It's an ingredient found in Monsanto's Roundup, and hundreds of other herbicides has been found in vaccines. This organization, Moms Across America, received preliminary screening results from Microbe Inotech Laboratories of St. Louis, Missouri, which showed that the DTaP Adacel from Sanofi Pasteur vaccine has a 0.123 ppb parts per billion, right?
Yes, correct.
Influenza fluvirin, which is made by Novartis, it has a 0.331 ppb, and Hep B Energex B GlaxoSmithKline, a level of 0.325 ppb, and pneumococcal vaccine polyvalent Pneumovax 23, which is created by Merck, has a 0.107 ppb of glyphosate. The MMR2 from Merck vaccine, which CDC whistleblower Dr. William Thompson has linked to autism, has levels up to 25% higher.
25 times higher.
25 times higher, than the other vaccines. Now this is
that's
something...
2.671 parts per billion. Now those are very, very, very small amounts. But you need to understand the World Health Organization has declared glyphosate a probable human carcinogen, And there is no legitimate reason for glyphosate, a weed killer, to be in vaccines that are being injected into your child.
Yeah.
And yes, you're going to say it's only a fraction of a part per billion, but when you look at how many shots you're being given, it starts to add up to a significant presence of glyphosate.
It's cumulative, right?
Well, I'm not sure how glyphosate degrades or in the body or what its persistence is, but the question is, why is it there in the first place? Along with a lot of these other adjuvants. And again, I keep going back to that story that we had last week, that during the H1N1 outbreak, Angela Merkel and her top government officials in Germany got a vaccine that had no adjuvants in it at all. And the people of Germany were required to take an H1N1 vaccine that had all the adjuvants. They did not have a chance to opt out. Well, if there's a reason for Angela Merkel and her people not to be exposed to the adjuvants, there's a reason for you not to be exposed to the adjuvants. And when we see the vaccine industry trying to mandate all these vaccines for all of us, when you see newspapers like the Boston Herald out there saying that anybody who doubts the safety of vaccines ought to be hanged, there's something going on. And we understand that vaccines are a big money business, $30 billion a year. But it's like there's this agenda to make sure everybody gets stuck with a needle for whatever the reason is. And it may be money and it may be something else.
Well, you know, it's, I wonder what people are doing in terms of looking at long-term effects of that.
Nobody's looking. Nobody wants to find out.
Wow.
And again, the golden rule of science, whoever has the gold decides the science.
Yeah.
And nobody wants to look at the long-term studies. They're considered a waste of time and a waste of money, which is why we have so many of these FDA-approved medications that go on out and they start causing harm. And we start seeing all these commercials on TV. Did you take blah, blah, blah?
Yes.
And if you did and your nose fell off, you may be entitled to a cash settlement. And they seem to think this is good health policy, to sell you a medicine, and if it does harm you, well, they'll give you some money, and that makes everything all hunky-dory.
No, it doesn't for the child and their family. They're living with that for the rest of their lives.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
This is not a good health policy. It's good for business,
Yeah.
but it's not a good health policy.
Yeah. And I'd like to go back to that documentary you and I saw, Vax.
Yes.
Speaking of which, and we may need to carry this through the hour, but I have given our copy to a friend from church, Chris, real bright guy, just finished his master's and works for the military, lovely family, 3 beautiful little girls and a little boy. And one of the things that this study indicated was the fact that these vaccines negatively impacted African American kids more. That data was just left out of the report, the CDC report on the efficacy and safety of vaccines.
Yeah, that's the real scary part. There's something in these vaccines that is specifically targeting the black population. We got to take a break for commercials. Back with the last segment of our program after these few words. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show. Last segment on this Pow Hunter Friday here. And before I turn the mic over to Claire again, I do want to remind everybody, this is so critical. This WannaCry ransomware is spreading all over the world very rapidly. It is not just ransomware, it is a worm, which means if it gets inside your local area network or your VPN, that it will just infect all the other machines. It's causing horrendous amounts of damage. Apparently, it arrives as an attachment in an email that appears to be from somebody that you know. So just be very, very vigilant about not opening anything that could be an executable or contain macros or anything. Err on the side of caution. You can always get more pictures of your newborn nephew, a couple of weeks down the road, and hopefully they're going to find a way to block this. But I'm hoping that the economic harm, plus the threat to life in the hospital systems, is finally going to get people to wake up and realize that our internet, IT infrastructure is incredibly weak and fragile, and that the NSA has deliberately made it so for their nefarious purposes. And the NSA set the stage for this. They created this mess in their desire to invade all of our privacy at will, a violation of the Fourth Amendment, I might add. But maybe it's time to start waking up and realizing cybercrime is a serious threat to the nation's economy, and it's time to start designing new systems to track down these hackers, these cyber criminals, arrest them, and have some very stiff punishments for them, because it's only going to get worse. The ransomware situation continues to explode, as today is illustrating. We have the FBI saying, pay the ransom, that's all we can do. That's not acceptable anymore. That's not acceptable anymore. And along with his Vaccine Safety Commission and his Election Integrity Commission, I think Donald Trump ought to set up a Computer Security Commission. Now, he's already signed an executive order trying to increase security for the federal government networks. How about for the Internet as a whole, given how dependent much of modern commerce is now on that same Internet?
Amen.
And you had something that you wanted to say.
Well, something a little lighter and on a personal note. I celebrated my 68th birthday last Tuesday, and it was lovely. And I can tell you very honestly, there was no difference between being 67 and 68. But tomorrow was really special, because tomorrow Mike and I celebrate the 25th anniversary of the day we met. We celebrate two. Our wedding is in December, and tomorrow is the anniversary of the day we met.
And we met at a Jack in the Box in North Hollywood. Nobody believes us, but that's exactly what it was.
That's the God's
Standing
truth.
in line.
Yeah.
Yep.
And, you know, I am just very delighted that he was there.
Well, ditto, back at you.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
So tomorrow we're probably going to not be doing quite as much posting on the site. And we're going
to have other things in mind.
We have other things
in mind.
So,
and we need a little bit of a break. We're a little fried. It's intense. We work at this 7 days a week, 12, 14 hours a day, and so we're gonna keep an eye on the news and everything. But we're gonna have a little mini staycation, and kind of pull back and try and get our headspace together.
Definitely.
There's the music. Time for us to get out of here. Have a good weekend. Happy Pauhana Friday. We'll be back on Monday at the Republic Broadcasting Network. Aloha, America.